out with, you should all be able to get your hands on this little texture tutorial box. If you're not able to, you can still watch the video and follow along and use any objects and textures that you want. So to start out with, you need to open the box, and these are all the textures and objects that we'll be using in the tutorial. So do copy to inventory, and it will make a new folder in your inventory called the texture tutorial box. And so here are all the objects. So to start out with, get out tutorial prim 1, and you just drag it onto the screen. So this is the simplest shape, it's just a box. So we'll start out by editing it and go to the texture tab, and there are a whole bunch of textures in the OpenSim library that anyone can use. So you can go through and look at some of the ones. Okay, now the way we just did it, it changes the texture on every face of the object. Now, if you didn't want to do that, if you wanted to change the texture on only a single face, you click on the Select Faces to Texture radio button, and then you can click on any face you want to change the texture on just that face. Go ahead and change the texture on all the faces real quick, just to see what some of the different textures are at your disposal. It's a good idea to familiarize yourself with some of these default textures, so you know what you already have at your disposal. You don't have to constantly upload new textures. If you want to do the bottom texture, and the way I'm rotating the screen around the object is you hold Control and Alt, and then you can drag your mouse around to change the view, and you can zoom in and out if you have a middle mouse button scroll. So go back to Select Faces to Texture. Pretty good. And if you want to quickly go back to the default view, you can just move your character. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now we're going to change the object into something that you might actually use. We're going to make it into a box for a tube of toothpaste. So we're going to be using this crest texture. So to see what it looks like, you can click on it. And we're going to want to make the object size so that it fits these dimensions. So right now, the dimensions for the image are 512 by 128. So if we go into the object to change its size real quick, alright, so we can see that the blue, which is Z, is the height. So we'll make that 1.28 to keep it easy. And then the length is the red, which is X, and that's going to be 5.12. And then to keep the edges, there we go. And then to keep the ends square, we'll make Y 1.28 as well. Alright, now we'll go back into texture. And now we'll be looking in your inventory. And usually when you upload a texture, they'll appear in your texture folder. But since we got this texture from the box, we'll open the texture tutorial box folder. And here's the crest. Okay, so now it looks like we're going to need to edit a few of the faces. Now, we want the blue crest part to line up on each face. So we can go in by select face to texture. We'll start with this top one. And now we're going to need to rotate it. So there's this rotation. So let's try 180 degrees. There. That got that aligned. And we won't change this. So now we're going to need to flip this as well. So we'll do 180 degrees again. And that's lined up. And even though it's upside down, it looks better this way. And if we were to change the image itself to be a mirror image, then the crest would appear backwards, and we wouldn't want that. So now the bottom. There we go. So now all we have to deal with are the two ends. So we don't want to use this crest image for the ends. So we'll go into texture and choose blank. And then we can choose a color for it. And you just go in, and since this is just real quick, we'll just pick a color that's close. And on the ends, we can choose a grayish color. Looks pretty good. So now that's our box for the tube of toothpaste. Now as you can see, the texture doesn't line up perfectly. It's not the best texture. But something like this would be small anyway, so you wouldn't be able to see that. So if we want to go in to change this real quick, we can divide everything by 10. 0.512. 0.128 and 0.128. So there we go, our tube of toothpaste box. So now we can get rid of this object. If you want to, you can take it, or you can just delete it. When you take it, it'll go into your inventory. Alright, so get out your Tutorial Prim 2. And here's just a cylindrical object. So we can go in and edit it, zoom in a little bit so you can see better. We can raise it up some. So, first we're going to look at how textures apply differently to faces of different kinds of objects. So go into the Open Sim library, and we're going to use the mahogany texture, because that's the easiest to see the lines, the way the lines in the grain of wood are oriented. So, the tops and bottoms look fine, but the sides are sort of blurry and they don't match the object real well. So we'll go into Select Faces, you can click on the side, and under Mapping, instead of Default, use Planar. And there if you zoom in some, you can see that the grain of the wood is going up and down now. So that looks much better. And if you want to make it go side to side instead, you can go into rotation and change that to 90. You can also change the repeats per meter, and you can mess around with that a little bit to try and get it to be the right size that you want, but we won't do that right now. Now we're going to create your own custom texture, a real simple one, and upload it and then apply it to this object. So get out Paint or some other image editing software. It doesn't have to be fancy or anything. We'll just start off by making a square shape, and then you can pick any background color you want. And then add some sort of text. I'll just put my name here. And center it. Okay, so then you can save it. And now, I should mention that I am using the Imprudence client. So if you're using the Second Life client, it's still very easy to upload. It'll just be in a different spot. And also if you're using the Second Life client, it will say that you need 10 Linden dollars to upload it. But since we're not using Second Life, we're using OpenSim, it's still free, just like with Imprudence. So you go to File and Upload Image, and then you need to find your image, and you click Upload, and then it will appear in your texture folder. So you can drag it over to use it, or you can open it from your texture folder. Okay, now, since I was already still on Select Faces to Texture, it only applied it to this face. And unfortunately, I don't even want it for that face anyways. So I'll deselect that, and I'll just go in here, My Inventory, your texture folder. There we go. Alright, now, like I said before, we don't necessarily want that on the sides. So we'll go back to Select Faces to Texture, and go with Blank. And now, this time we're going to match the color of the background that you picked exactly. So go back to Paint or whatever image software you used, and you'll need to find the RGB color of the background that you used. So with this version of Paint, you can go into Edit Colors and select the color you used, and you'll see that in this case it's 255, 255, and 0. So you click on Color, and you can enter those values in, 255, 255, and 0. There we go. Now, if you wanted to change the orientation or the size of your top image, you could, but we're going to be doing that in another tutorial, so we won't do that right now. So we're done with this object. You can get rid of it. Now you'll want to take out the tutorial hologram presenter. And this is an object that I've used to present either videos or PowerPoints or anything like that. And so you can use this as well, or anything else that you want. So it's supposed to look like a hologram coming out of the ground. And this here at the bottom is the light source for the hologram. So we'll start by editing that. Now since this is an object with multiple prims, you'll want to make sure that the Edit Linked Parts box is marked. So you'll only edit a single prim at a time. So click on the prim that you want. We'll start with this bottom one. And we'll make this the holder for the light. So something that looks somewhat like metal. And I'll go with the steel texture right here. And now we can make that a little darker if we want. So we just go in here. And you can see it as you're working. That looks pretty good. Now we'll go on to the light. So we won't want a texture for this, just blank. And since this is a hologram, we can give this a little bit of a bluish color if you want. Now we'll be wanting to use this color in other parts of the object, so you'll want to remember what the RGB for it is. And since this is a light, we can start to mess with the glow. If you want, you can also try the full bright. It works differently with different computers and different graphic cards, and a lot of times it's too bright. And on my computer, it doesn't do that, but on a lot it does, so I usually don't use full bright. And now we can work on the upper part. And if you want to make it easier, you can click on one of them, and to select both of them to texture both of them at the same time, since they're pretty much going to be the same, you hold down Shift and click on the other one. So then we'll do a blank texture again, and the color. Nope, it was that one. And I think this was, oh, it was that one. And this was 50. Okay, so now we can do the glow here as well. And we can also do some transparency, since this is just light. So 20 looks pretty good. And now we will want to work on just this front face of the object. So click back on this, and it deselects this bottom face, and make sure you're on Select Faces to Texture. And now I've provided you with a sample PowerPoint image. It's in the texture tutorial box folder, and it's called the sample PowerPoint slide, just to see what something like this looks like. And of course, if you didn't want to, you don't have to add the blue color to make it look a little more professional. Now, again, since I'm using Imprudence, you can't view media prims. But for those of you using the Second Life client, you can still apply the texture in Imprudence as well. So go into the OpenSim library, texture library, and it's called the default media texture. And again, it doesn't really show anything in Imprudence, but in the Second Life client you can set it to go to different URLs.